A home used to be a particular size house that had a particular set of amenities, that maybe had a particular address, that maybe had a particular way of signaling something about who you are. You go through the experience that I've had the privilege to go through, where I get to see so many people becoming homeowners, so many agents helping folks in the process of just that. And you come to realize that the beauty of home is in the community. It's the community you create, and it's the community within which you live.
But this is my house, Mommy. The one I asked Mr. Kringle for. It is. I know it is.
Welcome to The Pursuit of Home, coming to you from New York City. This is real people buying real estate and their unique journey to get there. We share the tips, tricks, and frameworks to help you navigate the bumps in the road that you won't see on reality TV or social media, and which no one has talked about until now. These are the emotional, psychological, ethical, and even spiritual challenges you're more than likely to encounter yourself. Learn from experts who've been there and hang out with me, Scott Harris, your host, who's helped thousands of people buy homes in Manhattan over the last 2 decades. Welcome to The Pursuit of Home, where we explore what it really means to find and create a place to call home. But today's conversation is more than just an episode. It is a celebration, because we're releasing this episode on October 14th, which is the publication date for my book, The Pursuit of Home, a real estate guide to achieving the American dream. Now, the premise of the book is that finding a home is a really, really big deal, and buyers are not always prepared for just how big a deal that is, how much of an emotional, psychological, even spiritual journey it is. And I wrote the book to give you a roadmap to navigate this journey. And it's now available for order anywhere you find books or ebooks. So push pause and go and order the book. We'll wait for you right here. One of the biggest things you can do, and I talk about it all the time, is to find an agent who gets you and that you feel like you're seen and heard and understood around them. There are amazing agents out there, some with just a year or two of experience, some with 2 decades of experience, like myself. Very few people know about great agents more than my guest today, Guy Gal. Guy's experience buying a home was so powerful that it led him to launch Side, which is a real estate brokerage that operates behind the scenes of some of the most successful real estate agencies around the US. And it's grown to be the 9th largest brokerage firm in the country based on volume. And all of that is based on the premise of making sure great agents can do their best work. Guy, welcome to the show.
Hello, Scott. It's really a pleasure to be here. Can I just say I love the cover of the book? It's brilliant.
Thank you very much. Believe it or not, that I think about these things in almost like the cover of a book is what inspires me to write the book. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I came up with the idea of a door on the cover of the book about 3 years ago.
Yeah,
and
it's
amazing.
Amazing.
It's right there. It's in the world. It's really exciting.
So we do judge books based on their cover.
You do indeed.
Well, I know I pre-ordered 100 of them, so that could give the gift of what it is you have to share in them to anyone and everyone that comes through the site office here in the next few weeks, which is in San Francisco. But as you mentioned, we have the great privilege to get to do the work that Side does all across the country, including with you in New York.
Yeah. Guy, I'm wondering if you can describe your experience buying your home.
Yeah.
And the experience that gave you that aha moment that caused you to launch Side. And I guess to get to the heart of it, what was the vision for the business and how's that changed over time?
Well, what's really interesting about that experience is that it made me swear at that point in time that I would never purchase a home again, because the experience was particularly unpleasant. And it wasn't until many years after the fact that, in contrast to that experience, another experience that I had going through a home purchase that gave me the insight to see that not all agents are created equal. So the very first time that I sold, or rather went through the purchase of a home, I worked with an agent who, this being my first time buying a home, presented in such a way that I thought they were very experienced. And it wasn't until several years later that I realized and found out that the experience they were representing was that of their entire real estate office, but that they as an individual had not had much experience helping people through that process. And because I did not have a lot of experience helping folks through that process, there was a lot that happened in my experience that left me with a lot of knowledge gaps and a great deal of misunderstanding when it came to what I was actually doing and how I was doing it. And it was very much at that point that I said, I will never own anything again. I'll never buy a home again. I'll just rent for the rest of my life. And then several years later, I helped my parents through a buy-side transaction, and the agent that they worked with was an agent who I went to high school with, who was not an agent at the time when I went to high school with them. But we had a close relationship because of that. And seeing how it is that they were able to help my parents through that experience, an experience I was very much involved in, that stood in such stark contrast to the one I had before, made me ask myself, why was it so different? And why was it so inconsistent? And I came to learn from that agent that it's the agent that creates the experience, not the brokerage, and that the agent's experience is what translates into yours. And, what it is that they know, what it is that they've seen. And that inspired me to say, we need to create a company that helps really great agents be able to differentiate themselves and stand out from everyone else, such that buyers, sellers, renters can identify them in the first place and understand that they're not the same, they're not average, they're quite extraordinary, and they can bring a whole lot more value to the table and create a much better experience than the average person can.
Yeah, it's a quality control issue that if you make sure that you sort of build these companies in the mold of the best agents out there, that it just elevates the whole experience. I mean, if you could describe what the perfect agent to have alongside you, in your pursuit of home, like what qualities would they have, and like what is Side doing to create more of these agents?
So what's interesting is that Side doesn't do much to create those kinds of agents. What we do is we identify folks like yourself who already have a great deal of experience and have figured it out, have gone through hundreds of transactions and have deep exposure to all the different nuances that present themselves in so many different permeations across so many different types of buying and even selling and even renting experiences. And then we work to make sure that the community around you, that people who are looking to buy, sell, and rent in your community, understand that you are exceptional and not the same as everyone else. And we put someone like yourself, agents like yourself, in a position then where you can mentor the next generation of excellent agents, so that if there is someone who is very committed and very serious about real estate as a profession, as opposed to real estate as something they do on the side once in a while, they can find themselves apprenticing with someone like you who's been there and done that, and can train them and coach them up such that they can actually meet the needs and create great experiences for a buyer, because you're there to fill in the gaps and you're there to make sure that they're not making the mistakes that agents would typically make if they're trying to do that entirely on their own. And in that way, you proliferate excellence and raise standards in the real estate industry. As you take folks who already set the standard and you help put them in a position where they can replicate themselves.
You did a deep dive into real estate agents, on the heels of both a bad experience and then a good experience. And I'm so focused all the time on what do great agents look like. But I know that in your research, of course, you're going to uncover some things that may be uncomfortable, disconcerting about how many deals real estate agents how many deals they do a year and what that means. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'll say this. a lot of folks in the real estate industry believe that the Pareto principle applies to the industry. They believe that 20% of agents facilitate 80% of the actual transaction experiences, but that does not apply in the real estate industry. When we started Side, 70% of all transactions that buy and sell that were happening nationally were being closed by agents that were doing that 1 to 3 times a year, which is just not enough for them to truly understand the pulse of the market and the nuances that can present themselves in any given transaction experience. Today, nearly a decade later, about 9 years later, that number is 67%. So in spite of all of the consolidation you've seen in industry, it's still such that 2/3 of all transactions are handled by relatively inexperienced hands. And that does not make for great experiences for the 7 out of every 10 people who go through the largest, most infrequent, most high stakes transaction experience, financial decision of their lives. And so it really behooves Side, and is at the heart of our mission, to work very diligently to help more buyers, in particular, of course, people who are selling and renting as well, to find themselves in the hands of people like yourself who do this 3 to 4 times a month or more, as opposed to 1 to 3 times a year. There is a lot less of a trade-off when you're working with somebody that deals in a high frequency of transactions than there is when you deal with somebody who deals in very few, which is to say that maybe conventional wisdom would suggest or imply that, well, if Scott's closing 3 or 4 or 5, 6 or 6 deals a month, if he's helping that many people through those many experiences each and every month, maybe he doesn't have the capacity for me or the time for me to truly get into the weeds with me and walk me through all of the things that I need to be walked through. But even though that might seem like the conventional wisdom and it may seem counterintuitive, it's quite the opposite. The fact that your thumb is so on the pulse, your finger is so on the pulse, that you are very much in the day-to-day of what's happening moment by moment, hour by hour in the community, in the market, is what makes you such an amazing person to have by someone's side when they're going through that experience. And then, of course, you put people around you to help you make sure that everything you're doing is really organized.
Yeah, I want to just touch on, in my book, what I realized also, just to add to what you're saying, that 70% of all these transactions, maybe now it's 67%, 2/3 of all transactions are handled by agents that do so few deals a year.
When?
On top of that, what we realized is that if you break it out by how many agents are new to the business, the chances that you are engaging at an open house with an agent that has only been in the business for 2 years or less, you have a 1 in 6 chance.
Oh yeah.
So it's astonishing that, first, that deals get done at all, but that, what's not surprising is that the reporting about how, your experience of buying a home was so negative. You swore you weren't going to ever buy another house. And so many people are reporting similar negative experiences. The whole point of writing the book was, how do you have a better experience finding a home? How do you have a better experience? How do you find an agent who speaks your language, who connects with you, who helps you feel understood so you can relax and really focus on what's really important, which is finding a home that you love? You've helped, your company, Side has helped launch over 600 companies, agent-led companies. What have you learned about what great agents are focused on? Because I know the motivation's about a lot more than commission. Are there certain kind of traits that you look for, or that you find that agents that are kind of excel and become great? Are there certain elements that you're like, I know this person is going to be successful launching their own company and they're going to ultimately have, help more people? What do you find? What do you look for?
You very much hit the nail on the head that the most successful agents rarely keep track or even realize how many people they're helping. They're so in the flow of that practice. They're so devoted to their profession. That's what motivates them more than anything else does, is helping people. So I often say that a great agent is a fiduciary, in that they will never, and we see this show up all the time with agents like yourself, a great agent will never mortgage the future, theirs or their clients, for gains in the present. And what that means, the way that shows up on the buy side in particular, is that they'll go and show you 40 homes, knowing that they can convince you without much trouble at all into that very first home that you see. They have that power, but from that power, they derive a great deal of responsibility, where they should say, I can tell this is not exactly what's going to satisfy what you're looking for. You're not going to love this home. And even if it means that we're going to go out and see 40 more of them, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to get it right. We're not going to cut corners. We're not going to compromise what it is that is going to satisfy your need. That is how agents become really excellent and really high volume in the first place, is they don't cut corners and they don't compromise integrity. They have a deep understanding of what the buyer genuinely is looking for and wants. They have a sincerity about how much it is that they care to make sure that the experience they have and the result they have is an excellent one. And they're committed to seeing that through, even if it means that it's a whole lot more of their time, a whole lot more of their energy. They are there for it. And what I find in agents that aren't necessarily very successful is that they're constantly mortgaging their future and the future prospects or the experience of their client for gains in the present. They would rather get you into the first house that you see. They're there to sell you on it, as opposed to actually consult you through it.
Yeah, I call that kind of a transactional mindset versus a relationship or a relational mindset. I think that it's a huge distinction. You use the word caring. I think that also becomes kind of the way that we're looking for agents. And what I recommend to the readers of my book, that if you find someone and you feel that they care about you, and I give people like a laundry list of questions that they can ask to kind of look inside and speak to their spouse, like, how do we feel around this person? Because what happens is you start working with the go-to person in the market, but they've been doing this for so long, they have their assistant do it and they don't really have their eye on the ball. And so sometimes it becomes transactional and you can feel it. And you're like, something doesn't feel right. And they can't relax. They can't trust the process. And the outcome is not as good. I want to talk about agents a little bit. And I want to go behind the scenes, because this is, you've helped over 600 companies. Side has helped over 600 companies launch. A lot of agents spend time kind of spelling out home buying, for their clients. Home buying is a way to build equity, yet working at a big box brokerage firm almost never allows agents to build equity, right? They can't practice what they preach. So they go and build equity through real estate investing, other businesses, side hustles, whatever. They have to become real estate investors instead of building their own business. And Side is sort of allowed for agents to design, build companies that are different. What is the feedback been? Cause it's really a new model of real estate. And how do you see it fitting into, the sort of broader context of business today?
If you look at across the spectrum, if you look across the spectrum of professions, virtually every person who is a professional that is working in a trade like like maybe as an electrician, a plumber, a dentist, they own their business. They're able to build equity and asset value in the company that they themselves are driving and building. And if you look at real estate, there's no such thing as a successful agent that isn't in effect operating a business. But in the status quo of real estate, those agents don't actually get to own the business, because when you look at the real estate industry, what's very different about it than, say, the legal industry or the trades, is that to own in real estate, to own your company in real estate, you really have to operate two companies, two different businesses. One is a service business, a hospitality business, a consulting business, where you go out and meet the needs of people and help them connect the dots that from their point of view are quite invisible and from yours are very obvious. And the other side of that business is the brokerage business, which is less so of a service business and much more so of an infrastructure business. It's an administrative business. It's the part of the business that acts as the fiduciary on behalf of the state. And that work, the work that requires, is work that's far removed from the actual buyer, seller, renter, and the time and expertise required to help them have a great experience and to satisfy their needs. Very, very different things, which is why in the real estate industry, you see so many folks that run a business but don't own the business. It's not for any other reason than it's exactly how the industry is set up. It's the structure of the industry. And in that way, you have a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of business operators that don't get to practice what they preach or realize the value of all of their amazingly hard work and all of the care and time they invest in the profession. Side, about 9 years ago, when we started the company, realized that the only thing standing in the way of so many agents taking ownership of the business they were already operating was making it so that they wouldn't have to be responsible for that administrative infrastructure brokerage component, which today, for you to not be responsible for that, you have to give up all the equity to somebody else. And so we got to reimagine what a brokerage could look like that did not participate in the equity that the agent was creating and should be capturing for themselves. And that's why we became the world's first and today only invisible brokerage, right? We do everything back office and it's all we do. And because of that, we do it better than anyone and have then the privilege of being in service to folks like you who can take all of the amazing experience that you have and all the work and all the equity that you're creating inside of your business and invest that in a company that you yourself own, but do that in a way where you stand apart, right? Where your values manifest not just in how you show up day to day for a client, but also how they show up and manifest in your brand.
Yeah, I don't go into so much on this podcast talking about Magnetic and what I've built and how we do it, because so much of what I'm offering here on the podcast is I want to help real buyers figure out what they're about to go through so they can have a better experience. It's what we do at Magnetic on a day-to-day in New York, but you're seeing this play out across hundreds and hundreds of businesses, and 9-10 years down the road, obviously you're growing and growing. I want to look a little bit big picture as we sort of get closer, landing this plane. You have a unique vantage point, right, on the industry's future. Do you have a sense that the trend is moving away from like transactional agent towards a more consultative or advisory role? And if so, I mean, I guess the question is, how do you feel it's going to benefit the consumer? Do you think that there's really an opening here? And how does it work at scale? Because you've got 600 companies now. How do you quality control, and how do you make sure that agents, not you, but how do you sort of embed this in the companies to make sure that buyers are having the best experience possible from your side?
The best way to ensure that buyers have a great experience is to make sure they work with great agents. The thing that makes that difficult in the status quo of real estate is that you'll have thousands of agents in one particular city or community that all share the same brand. And of those thousands of agents, a very small fraction, a small minority will be the ones who are genuinely experienced. And because they look, sound, feel, and ultimately present in very similar ways to one another, because they're sharing that brand, it's very hard to tell them apart. And that's where buyers oftentimes end up working with agents who seem like they're quite experienced, but aren't very much at all. And so from my point of view, if you look at real estate historically, its golden age was pre-corporate consolidation, when every single community was being served by that local boutique office that was owned and operated by the people who actually showed up to help the client every single day. That pride of ownership, that deep care, the fact that they had skin in that game in a very direct way, aligned everyone's interests such that the experience was always more optimal and always more consistent. And then, of course, the invention of corporation presented itself maybe 75, 80 years ago. And a lot of capital came into real estate in this way, where all of these mom and pop, local, specialized, of the community, by the community, real estate agencies got consolidated into these monolith type, one size fits all brands that aimed to be something for everyone, which meant they were nothing for anyone. And in that process, we really lost the ability to maintain high standards in real estate and deliver consistent quality. It became more of a quantity game, a numbers game. And that is the game that serves the interests of the large real estate corporations, whom today control about 40% of the sales in any particular given market nationally. That, I always say, is something that defies the gravity of real estate, because the physics of real estate are local, they're not national. And to defy the gravity of those local physics, you need a lot of fuel. And that fuel typically is in the form of outside capital. And so to the degree that you've got more of that to spend and consolidate more and acquire more and patch together different local agencies more, you can continue to defy that gravity for a certain amount of time. But at the end of the day, the physics of it are such that it always wants to come back to local. That's where it always is pulling back. It's always pulling back to local. So I say the past is boutique and so is the future. That's the best way to serve community, with folks that live in the community, care about the community, are of the community, or the community, and contribute to building the community, that invest in their community, time, care, money, which takes so many different forms. That is where we start. That is where we'll finish. And in between, there'll be some permutations and some forms that companies take that maybe aren't particularly aligned or natural, but those are what's transient, because they trade in quantity and in transaction. And what always endures, is relationship. Community, the framework of community, the format of community, the structure of community is a really enduring structure. And we always come back to that, even if at times we find ourselves departing from it.
Amazing. I mean, I love the idea that, we had a model that worked. We had a boutique model where everybody operated. The way I like to put it is, whatever you do, are you comfortable with it being on the front page of the New York Times, right?
Exactly.
And if you can say yes, then odds are you're going to handle your business with a great deal of integrity. And, that ends up being a way that, sort of a litmus test for someone who's good in helping you in whatever the business is. But in real estate, I walk down the street and I see all my clients, I'm in the neighborhood. That's what agents do. And that's never going to change. It's just a matter of making sure that you're part of an organization that really keeps that localness to first and foremost. I want to finish with one more question, Guy. You've now been a part of millions and millions of transactions. There's 6 million transactions a year in the United States. Your side is now the 9th largest brokerage, invisible brokerage, but
Yes.
important, a force for good. Given everything that you see and all the agents you see and everything else, what does home mean to you now compared to when you first started this and you were just focused on your own transactions? What is home? Has the meaning of home changed for you?
Yeah, home used to be a particular size house that had a particular set of amenities, that maybe had a particular address, that maybe had a particular way of signaling or saying something about who you are, your own identity. And then, of course, you go through the experience that I've had the privilege to go through, where I get to see so many people becoming homeowners, so many agents helping folks in the process of just that, and doing that at all shapes, in all sizes, at all price points, all different types of addresses. And you come to realize that the beauty of home is in the community. It's the community you create, and it's the community within which you live. It's not the size of the home. It's not the type of home. It's not the price of the home. It is the community that you decide that you're going to become a part of, and you're going to contribute to building and creating.
Guy Gal, thank you for being a part of the podcast.
Thank you for
You're
having
a gem, and there's no better way to end it than what you just said. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, and I can't wait to read the book.
That's it for this episode of The Pursuit of Home. I hope today's conversation gave you insight, clarity, and maybe even a new way to think about your own home search. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review the show. It really helps us reach more people on their own journey to home ownership. And when you're looking to dive deeper into your own home buying journey, don't forget The Pursuit of Home, a real estate guide to achieving the American dream, is now available wherever you buy your books. I share real-life strategies and insights to help you make empowered decisions in today's market so that you will find a house that supports you in every area of your life. The Pursuit of Home is proudly produced by Fame, the B2B podcast production agency. Find The Pursuit of Home on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere you listen to your podcasts. And if you want to connect, you can find me on social media or at magneticre.com. Until then, happy home hunting.